Originating from Greek mythology, the story of Medusa echoes as a tale of beauty, divine envy, and a tragic destiny. Before becoming the monster with the petrifying gaze, Medusa was a figure of dazzling beauty, possessing hair so lovely it seemed like liquid gold threads. She was one of the three Gorgons, but unlike her sisters Athena and Euryale, who were born immortal and monstrous, Medusa was born mortal and with a beauty that enchanted everyone. Medusa's life, in her youth, was dedicated to the service of one of Olympus's most powerful deities, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategic warfare, and the arts. Medusa served as one of her priestesses, vowing celibacy and chastity, a sacred commitment that directly linked her to the temple in Athena's honor. She resided in the goddess's own temple, a place of purity and devotion. Medusa's beauty, however, attracted the unwanted attention of Poseidon, the powerful god of the seas, earthquakes, and horses, known for his impetuous nature and numerous often non-consensual romances. Despite Medusa's vow of chastity and the sacred character of Athena's temple, Poseidon did not hesitate. He coveted Medusa and violated her within Athena's sanctuary. The act was a sacrilege, a desecration of the virgin goddess's most sacred place, and a direct affront to her authority and purity. The consequences of this act fell, cruelly and unjustly, upon Medusa. Athena, upon discovering the desecration of her temple, exploded in divine fury. Her wrath, however, was not directed at Poseidon, who was one of the powerful Olympians, and her uncle, with whom she already had complex rivalries. Instead, Athena's vengeance fell upon Medusa, the victim of the act, considered responsible for defiling the temple's sanctity. Athena's curse was terrible and transformative. Beautiful Medusa, whose greatest glory was her hair, had her beauty disfigured. Her golden hair was transformed into a mass of living, hissing serpents, each with its own venom and movements. Her once smooth and delicate skin gave way to greenish scales. Her features, once angelic, contorted into a bestial grimace, with boar-like tusks and a long tongue. And, most terrifying of all, her gaze became lethal. Anyone who dared fix their eyes on her would be instantly transformed into stone. However, in some retellings, she did not have so many monstrous features, only the serpent hair and a gaze that petrified anyone who looked. Athena condemned Medusa to an existence of monstrosity and solitude. The pure priestess was converted into a monster, destined to live in isolation, terrorizing all who approached. Athena's curse, although understandable from the perspective of divine honor and punishment for desecration, is seen by many as a manifestation of the Olympian gods' rigidity, who imposed severe and often disproportionate punishments, without considering the victim's guilt or innocence. Medusa's beauty was her ruin, and her transformation marked the beginning of her existence as the most famous of the Gorgons, a being of terror whose gaze was death itself. With her beauty converted into a spectacle of horror, Medusa, Athena's priestess, was condemned to an existence of monstrosity and exile. Her curse, imposed by divine fury, transformed her into a being who could no longer relate to the mortal world. Her every glance now carried death, solidifying life into stone. This condemnation to perpetual isolation was, in itself, a torment as cruel as her new form. Banished from the company of gods and mortals, Medusa sought refuge in an isolated lair, far from any civilization. Tradition describes her dwelling as a gloomy cave on a remote island, possibly in the far west of the known world, a desolate place where land met the distant ocean. The path to her hideout's entrance was paved with the stone statues of her victims, men, animals, and even birds, all petrified in their last expressions of terror. These frozen figures served as a silent and macabre warning to anyone who dared approach, and also as a sad memorial to her own cursed existence. Together with Medusa, her sisters Athena and Euryale were also affected by Athena's curse. Although they were already monstrous and immortal creatures by nature, they came to share Medusa's terrifying appearance and the same ability to petrify with their gaze. Together, they were the three Gorgons, nightmarish beings, whose legends terrorized the seas and lands. However, the weight of the tragedy and the focus of notoriety always fell upon Medusa, the only mortal among them whose beauty had been the source of her disgrace, and whose vulnerability made her a target. Despite her grotesque appearance and destructive power, Medusa was not intrinsically evil by choice. Her life was a constant punishment, an imposed exile. She did not actively seek to turn beings into stone for pleasure. Her nature now forced her to, a bitter reflection of her own helplessness. Those who saw her, however, did not understand her story or her pain. They saw only the terrifying creature and the imminent danger. To the world, she was a monster, not a victim. Medusa's reputation, the Gorgon with a petrifying gaze, spread throughout the Greek world, becoming a cautionary tale about divine punishment and the dangers of the unknown. Her figure became a symbol of terror, but also of a tragic and disfigured beauty, a distant echo of the injustice that transformed her. Her destiny, however, would not be one of eternal reclusion. The legend of her gaze, the desire for heroism of some mortals, and the god's design would lead her to an inevitable confrontation, an encounter that would decide the end of her curse and the beginning of a new legend that would resonate through the millennia. The legend of the Gorgon Medusa, with her petrifying gaze and hissing snakes, spread throughout Hellas, reaching the ears of the gods on Olympus and the most ambitious mortals. On Seriphos, a rocky island in the Aegean Sea, lived the young Perseus, son of Zeus and the mortal Dano. His destiny was about to intertwine with that of the Gorgon, not by his own desire, but by a trick. Polydex, the king of Seriphos, who coveted Dano and wanted to get rid of Perseus, imposed on the hero a seemingly impossible mission, to bring Medusa's head as a gift. Perseus, aware of Medusa's mortality and the lethality of her gaze, knew that this mission could not be accomplished by mere strength or courage. He would need divine help. His piety and lineage favored him. The Olympian gods, tired of Medusa's threats or perhaps seeing in Perseus the instrument to restore order, intervened. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, and Perseus his protector, provided him with a bronze shield, polished and shining like a mirror. This artifact would be his vital defense, allowing him to see Medusa without being petrified. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, lent him his winged sandals, which would allow him to fly with speed and agility, and a scythe or scimitar, sharp and unbreakable, forged by Hephaestus himself, the only weapon capable of cutting the Gorgon's tough flesh. Additionally, the Stygian nymphs granted Perseus the helm of Hades, which made him invisible, and a magic pouch to hold Medusa's head. These artifacts were essential. Without them, Perseus's mission would be impossible. Armed with these divine gifts, Perseus embarked on his journey. First, he had to find the three ancient sisters, born with a single eye and a single tooth that they shared among themselves. They were the only ones who knew the way to the Stygian nymphs, who would give him the magical artifacts. Perseus tricked them, stealing their only eye and forcing them to reveal the nymphs' location. With the tools in hand, Perseus flew to Medusa's lair, propelled by Hermes' winged sandals, which lifted him above the treacherous terrain, allowing a safe and discreet approach. In some versions of the myth, Pegasus, the winged horse born from Medusa's head, is sometimes depicted as already existing and assisting Perseus before the battle, but the most common version emphasizes the winged sandals for his arrival. The lair's location was as gloomy and desolate as the legend itself. The cave entrance was dotted with stone statues of men and animals, eternalized in their last expressions of terror. Medusa slept, nestled with her sisters, Steno and Euryale. The air inside the lair was heavy, the silence broken only by the intermittent movement of the serpents in her hair, a sound that filled the environment with a premonition of death. Perseus, with the help of Athena and Hermes who guided him, knew that the moment was crucial and that the slightest error would be fatal. He could not look directly at Medusa. Using the bronze shield polished like a mirror, Perseus approached the monster, observing her reflection on the shimmering surface. Every movement of Medusa, every undulation of her serpents, was visible in the reflection. Hermes assisted him, perhaps holding his hand or guiding his blade, to ensure precision. The moment of attack was tense. Medusa slept, unaware of the invisible hero's presence. Perseus hovered over the monster, guiding his sharp scimitar through the shield's reflection. With a swift and precise blow, he decapitated Medusa. The severed head of the Gorgon, still with its serpents writhing and its petrifying gaze, was quickly placed in the magic pouch the nymphs had given him. From Medusa's severed neck, in a bloody miracle, two creatures were born, the majestic winged horse, Pegasus, and the giant Chrysaor, the man of the golden sword. These creatures were Medusa and Poseidon's children, revealing the Gorgon's divine lineage, even in her monstrous form. The birth of Pegasus and Chrysaor, amidst Medusa's violent death, underlines the strange duality and interconnection of mythology. Steno and Euryale, Medusa's immortal sisters, awoke to the noise and disturbance. Furious and lamenting their sister's death, they tried to pursue Perseus. However, the hero, using his winged sandals and Hades' helmet, which made him invisible, quickly flew away from the lair, escaping the other Gorgon's fury. The mission was accomplished. Medusa's threat had been eliminated, and Perseus now possessed the most powerful and fearsome of weapons, the Gorgon's head, which continued to petrify anyone who looked directly at it. His triumphant return with Medusa's head would mark the beginning of other heroic deeds, solidifying his place among the great heroes of Greek mythology. From Medusa's severed neck, in a bloody miracle that blended horror and the divine, two creatures were born, the majestic winged horse Pegasus, who flew freely into the heavens, and the giant Chrysaor, the man of the golden sword. These creatures were Medusa and Poseidon's children, revealing the Gorgon's divine lineage, even in her monstrous form, and the complex web of relations in mythology. The birth of Pegasus and Chrysaor, amidst Medusa's violent death, underscores the strange duality and the interconnection of life and death in Greek mythology, where wonder can arise from destruction. Medusa's head was not just a trophy. It became a tool of unparalleled power in Perseus's hands. He used it in several other heroic deeds, solidifying his reputation as one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. To save his mother, Dano, from King Polydex, who harassed her and pressured her to marry him, Perseus revealed Medusa's head. Polydex and his followers, upon looking at the Gorgon's face, were instantly turned into stone statues, receiving the fate they imposed on others. This was an act of justice and liberation. Later, the head was used by Perseus in a moment of desperation to save Andromeda from the fearsome sea monster Cetus, solidifying the creature into stone. His ability to use Medusa's head as a weapon, controlling its terrible power, demonstrated not only his cunning but also a certain mastery over the very chaos the Gorgon represented. Finally, after fulfilling his mission and using the power of Medusa's head for the benefit of others, Perseus, in an act of gratitude and devotion, offered the Gorgon's head to Athena, the goddess who had greatly assisted him and who was the source of the original curse. The goddess, accepting the gift, incorporated Medusa's head into her aegis, the shield or breastplate she wore in combat. Thus, Medusa's petrifying head, once a symbol of horror and punishment, became an even more powerful weapon in Athena's hands, a symbol of her inflexible justice and her protection for those who deserved it. The myth of Medusa, therefore, resonates with complexity. It is a tale of tragedy and injustice, of a victim transformed into a monster by a vengeful goddess. But it is also a story of heroism and cunning, where intelligence, courage, and divine aid overcome brute force. Medusa, the cursed figure, transcended her own fate to become a universal archetype of terror and fascination. Her image, with serpents instead of hair, continues to be one of the most iconic in Greek mythology, present in art, literature, cinema, and popular culture, an eternal reminder of the power of the gaze, the consequences of the god's wrath, and beauty that, paradoxically, can transform into monstrosity. Her story, full of twists and turns and symbolism about fate and responsibility, endures through millennia, inviting us to reflect on beauty, monstrosity, and the complexity of divine justice in a world of imperfect gods and challenging mortals. The story of Medusa is one of the most iconic Greek myths, full of beauty, tragedy, curse, and heroism. Which aspect of this legend fascinates you most? The injustice of her transformation, Perseus's ingenuity in defeating her, or the power and mystery her image continues to exert on the human imagination? If you could possess one of the divine artifacts used by Perseus to complete his mission, the mirrored shield, the winged sandals, Hades' helmet of invisibility, or Hermes' scimitar, which would you choose? Share your opinion in the comments and join our discussion about the myths and heroes of ancient Greece. And if there's another legendary creature, a mythological enigma, or an event you'd love us to explore in our next video, leave your suggestion below. Your curiosity is our guide to unraveling the great stories of the world.